Here you are.
That's what I really should be doing too. After this.
Here you are. You want to see yourself?
No. You don't want to see what you look like?
I see myself.
Oh, okay. Well, look how delayed it is. You just put that down. Oop, you have two people.
Good morning. Good morning. I had to put on a wig because I felt like to read a book about Dolly Parton, you had to have some kind of character or something. Or at least some kind of crazy hair. How's everybody doing today? Well, we hope. Oh, there's Bryce.
Hi. Who's on there?
We
Yeah,
have
what do you have?
Sawdust and Butterflies.
Very exciting.
And the Real Blunt card.
We're over on Kauai in Kilauea.
So this is our first live story time. So we figured we might, wait a couple minutes for other people to join. We've got two people. You've got you two. That's okay. Even if it's just you two, that is totally fine. We will just read. Very riveting book. Oh, here comes Willow.
Hi. Say hi. Look at that. There you are.
There's Willow.
Say aloha.
I just want to make sure everyone can hear. Can you all hear properly?
Said Kinley Chapman. Kinley Chapman, what you doing online? Start reading.
Let me know if you guys can hear me. So I am going to... Oh, we had a good morning, Willow.
Good morning.
No directing.
Oh, no directing. Sorry.
Yeah. Perfect. Okay, so we're just going to go ahead and just start right into this. And then if anyone joins us, they'll just have to catch up. So if you saw our Instagram post, we are going to be doing Story Time with Curious. We have chosen our first book to be Dolly, My Life, and Other Unfinished Business. I first read this book in 2001, right after graduating high school. Yes, I'm that young. But we won't have to talk about it. The book is really, really great. And now I'm rambling, so we're just gonna, Dolly Parton's pretty fantastic, as we all know. Oh, we have someone wants to read with us, because she's very into riveting books. So, here we go. Bryce, you may have to grab this young lady. So I'm going to first start by the jacket of the book. Dolly is a Grammy Award winning singer and songwriter and has starred in such movies as 9 to 5, Steel Magnolias, The Best Little Whorehouse in Texas, which I recently just saw, and that movie was ridiculous, but it's very, very entertaining. And Straight Talk. Now that's a good movie too. If you're going to be locked in, you should probably quarantine over the next few weeks, months, year, who knows. You should watch Straight Talk.
Texas has a whorehouse in it.
And then there's Bryce. Her theme park, Dollywood, brings hundreds of thousands of fans each year to native eastern Tennessee. A humanitarian as well as a savvy businesswoman, Dolly Parton is a multi-talented dynamo. Oh, Willow really loves reading, but she wants to read along. Who tops the list of America's favorite superstars. Being as intensely private as she is talented, Dolly has never been talked openly about her life. The hard times as well as the good, until now. Are you ready? This is just the jacket, so I'm sure it's to get more exciting. In this inspiring autobiography, Dolly reveals how she got to where she is today. Her no-nonsense attitude and the down-home philosophy that has helped her from the start. This is the rags to riches story that millions have been waiting for, and all 6 of our viewers. Told as only Dolly can, through the voice of Andrew in a green wig, with integrity, insight, and her unfailing sense of humor. In her tell like it is style, Dolly describes her tough but loving upbringing in rural Sevier County, Tennessee. Now, I'm sure I'm going to pronounce some words through our reading inappropriately or incorrectly. Maybe I'll read too fast. Maybe I'll read too slow. Maybe you'll get bored. But you don't even have to be watching. You could just prop me up on your bookcase, your bathroom counter, take a bath, walk around. Just listen to the words come to you as you learn so much more as Dolly Parton. But let me know in the comments. I'll try to pay attention to the words if what you're saying, if I'm reading too fast or too slow. And I'll try to answer questions, but we're here to read a book. The fourth child of 12, Dolly grew up amid the Smoky Mountain traditions that often fill her songs, from the beloved patchwork coat that her mother made for her, which was the basis of her classic coat of many colors, to her wildflowers don't care where they grow. Dolly's young life was filled with the inspiration. Don't get too excited, I'm just flipping to the back jacket. Let's talk about this page work. This is 90's at best. Nice. Paper quality. Okay, for the music that would lead fiercely independent, ambitious 18-year-old out of Pigeon Forge, Tennessee, and bring her to Nashville with nothing but her guitar and her dreams. Here, Dolly candidly tells of her rise through the ranks of the country music community, from getting her first big break working with Porter Wagner to striking out as a star in her own right, rocketeering to the top of both the pop and country charts, releasing, again, this book came out in 94, so the facts are probably a little inappropriate, or not inappropriate, but incorrect now, because we are in 2020. It's a few years of difference. She releasing 62 albums that have sold more than 50 million copies worldwide and earned her a reputation not only as a singer, but as the top-notch composer of such classics as I Will Always Love You and 9 to 5. I don't know if I'm able to do this wig this whole time. She discusses the ups and downs of her life as a Nashville superstar and describes how her faith has helped her overcome the obstacles that are inherent in that life. She talks about her friendship. You know, I'm bored with the jacket. I am just bored with this jacket of the book. The picture, not so much. Love this picture. So we're just going to delve right in. There is 18 chapters. We're trying to figure out if we do one a day, one every other day. We do this one on Sundays, but then if for some reason we're out of quarantine in 18 weeks, less than 18 weeks, we wouldn't finish the book. So we'll just figure it out. So let's just dive right in. Dolly Parton wants you to know that I dedicated this book to my God, my family, my friends, and my fans. That is all of you. Special thanks. Thank you, Buddy Sheffield, for your talent, inspiration, humor, love, and devotion. I thank you, too, for the use of your computer, the one on your lap and the one on your shoulders. I love and appreciate you more than you might ever know. Thanks, Gladys Carr, for being the world's greatest editor, and for... I'm not reading the thank yous. I can't. But I'll read the foreword. So, for those of us that are joining, we are reading Dolly, My Life and Other Unfinished Business, first published in the mid-90s. Forward. Once upon a time, and far, far away, back in the hollers at the foothills of the Great Smoky Mountains of East Tennessee, there lived a little girl with yellow hair. I lost my place already. Just kidding. Blue-green eyes. So she had yellow hair, blue-green eyes, fair skin, and freckles. She loved to read almost as much as she loved to dream. She read everything she could get her little hands on. The Bible, the Farmer's Almanac, the Funeral Home Directory, the directions and descriptions of the garden and flower seed packets, all the medicine bottles, catalogs, any and all kinds of male school books. But mostly she loved fairy tales. So I grew up, not me, Dolly. I grew up to be a fairy princess of sorts. I guess you could say I grew up to be a fairy too. More of a Cinderella story. The rags to riches kind. I always loved books. I don't remember learning to read. It was just something I always did. I was hungry for knowledge, I guess, and information. I was a curious kid. I still am. I loved to write stories. I wrote stories back then, not just songs, but long, involved stories. Even when I was in school and supposed to give a book report, I would make up the story, make up the fictitious author, then get up and talk about it. Of course, the teachers never heard of it, and they must have known I made it up. They gave me good grades for creativity, I am sure. On the occasions when I was asked about the book, the library And the author, I would just say it was a book that my grandpa had or one I found at my neighbor's. I was also a creative liar. This book was harder to write, as I had to tell the truth because I lived it. Some writers once said that writing your life story is the hardest thing you'll ever do. I think we should all try to do that over the next few weeks, write our own story and see if Dolly's right. I believe that now, although it didn't register with me until I started to write my own, that this was hard. It sure takes a lot out of you. It stirs up every emotion possible. I often had to stop because I couldn't take it anymore. Sometimes I would laugh out loud. Sometimes I'd cry uncontrollably from memories brought forward that had been buried for so long. Sometimes it would be like wading in a beautiful, clean, clear mountain stream. Well, that was the happy times. When the water would get muddy, those were the harder times. Then I'd completely marred up in the mud, and that was the worst of times. It was the best of times, it was the worst of times. I made it through, and I must say, I'm glad it's done. Like lines from one of my songs. No amount of money could buy from me the memories that I have of then, but no amount of money could pay me to go back and live it through again. That's from In the Good Old Days When Times Were Bad. My life has been far much better than it's been bad. I've had heartaches, headaches, toothaches, earaches, and I've had a few pains in the ass, but I've survived to tell about it. My life has been a coat of many colors, to quote another great song of mine, but I wouldn't change a thing. I just hope you get as much out of it as what I try to put in it. I tried to be as honest and open as I could be without completely hanging myself or somebody else. I wonder who that somebody was. I wonder who she was trying to hang or be excited about while writing this book. I hope we find out. Again, for those joining us, we are reading Dolly, My Life and Other Unfinished Business, published in the 90's. I tried to be as honest and open as I could be without completely hanging myself or somebody else. Oh, I read that part. You may like me more, or you may never like me at all, but you will know who I am and what I am about. I know you'll go straight to the gossip parts first. I would too. They're juicy. But after you've read those parts a few dozen times, please start at the front and read the whole story. It would mean a lot to me, and hopefully it will mean a lot to you as well. And that is where we're going to start. We are going to start on the next part, Dolly, which is the beginning. Prologue. I'm telling you, there's a lot of intros to this book, so today we're probably going to read the prologue in chapter 1. Let's see if you can make it through it. And if Willow doesn't go too crazy. Okay. Once in a while, it's very important to hydrate. So we have our coffee. And we have our water. But not the tequila, it's too early. Prologue. January 1946. The coldest day of the year. A biting wind blows the snow sideways through the remote hills of East Tennessee. The snow sticks to the sides of the trees and to the weathered walls of the house, little more than a shack, and blows up through the cracks in the floor, making long white rows like designs on an icy chenille bedspread. By the hearth, a worried young man stokes a fire, trying to raise the temperature and his hopes. His wife, a mere girl, lies in a crude bed, sweating in spite of the cold. This sounds more like a Harlequin novel's about to start. Even though this is not her first childbirth, nope, not a Harlequin, not a Harlequin. It is definitely a difficult one. The doctor has been sent for. Some distance away, a little horse chooses his steps carefully as he makes his way along a mountain ridge in the blinding snow. It's as if he knows his passenger is important. One wrong step, one icy rock, one animal burrow hidden by the snow, and the little horse might stumble. The doctor might be thrown. The baby, and even the young mother might not make it. The horse steps true. The doctor arrives. Oh, we're safe. Mother and baby come through all right. Ooh, this is good. Are you riveted? I am. The girl in the bed was Ava Lee Parton. The young man was Robert Lee Parton. The child born that day was Dolly Rebecca Parton. I didn't know that her middle name was Rebecca. And hopefully you didn't too, and now you know. That was me. Well, not me. That was her, Dolly. I've always believed that God guided that little horse's step that day, just as he continues to guide every step I take. There have been other books written about me, and much of what I have done or achieved in a life as a matter of record. Pun intended. Get it? Record. Her record. So, in this book, I will try to outline the events in my life that shaped, touched, or warped me, or otherwise made me who I am. I'm not saying that my life is one that other lives should be patterned after. Actually, I think it's a big mistake to try to pattern yourself too much after anybody else. That's a pretty good statement, I'm breaking away from the book. We should, try to be our own selves, pattern our own lives on our own selves. We are all individuals, just like snowflakes. No two of us are alike, and that, to me, is the beauty of it. I hope to tell in this book how I became the best Dolly Parton I can be, largely through trial and error. I can assure you, but it is up to you to be the best. Insert your name here. Mermaid Junk Kawaii, Mary Wu-Tang, Helion Kawaii, all the nuts and minerals Joyces, blah, 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 blah. Enter your name there. If I can help it any way, then I feel good about taking your money for this book. But you didn't give up your money. You're just enjoying this on this wonderful Sunday afternoon. If I don't help, I still feel okay about taking your money because I think you will at least be entertained. Besides, I need the money. As I always say, it costs a lot to make a person look this cheap. For me, it was a $5 wig at Walmart last 4th of July. I should say St. Patrick's Day. So not too much for me. Donations are welcome. Okay, chapter 1. I was born January 19th, 1946, in a one-room cabin in the banks of the Little Pigeon River in the Great Smoky Mountains of East Tennessee. I can't speak. In the Great Smoky Mountains of East Tennessee. I grew up poor. Very poor. In fact, my daddy couldn't afford to pay Dr. Thomas for delivering me, so he gave him a sack of cornmeal. I have often joked that I have been ranking in the dough ever since. Get it? Rigging in the dough. Okay. Being poor is something I am neither proud nor ashamed of. I have found that poverty is something you don't realize really well while you're in it. At least not if you're a kid with a head full of dreams and a house full of loving family. Oh, Bryce is in the back doing housework. And Willow's coughing. Don't worry, she's not sick. Oh! Phone down. Hold on. Phone down. Let's redo that angle. Do our angles.
I feel like Mr. Noodle.
At least... I am neither proud nor ashamed of it. I have found that... Okay, blah, blah, blah. Lord knows ours was full regarding her family. My mother got married when she was 15 and had 12 kids by the time she was 35. 15 kids by the time she was 35. Holy shit. Sorry if there was children listening. I was the fourth child after my sister Willa Dean and my brothers David and Denver. Coming along later would be Bobby, Stella, Cassie, Larry, Randy, the twins, Floyd and Frida, and my baby sister Rachel. My mama and daddy always gave us everything they could, and all of us kids knew and appreciated that, although it was never spoken. There's a funny thing about mountain folks. There's an awful lot that is never said out loud. I can remember very few times when one member of our family said the words, "I love you," to another. That doesn't mean it wasn't communicated. It's a kind of silent speech that says, "Thank you, Mama, for the hot butter beans," in the same way that a father might say to his son, "Nice going, you plowed a good straight row." That's farming. By giving the boy a light punch on the shoulder. It's kind of an eye-to-eye and a heart-to-heart language that in some ways I think is deeper and truer than the regular oral kind, because you have to pay closer attention to the one doing the talking. My daddy was a sharecropper. That means we didn't own the land we lived on. We farmed it for somebody else in return for a share of the crop. In a hard land that is stingy about giving up much of the crop, that share doesn't come to a whole lot. The land belonged to an old woman named Martha Williams. We called her Aunt Martha, even though she wasn't related to us. In the same way, love doesn't have to be spoken to be expressed. A person doesn't have to have blood ties with you to feel like part of your family. As for me, I couldn't have loved her more. My earliest memories are of Aunt Martha. I was often left with her when I was little. She was a good friend to me, and she made me feel special. Her big house was not far from our little cabin, and even as a little kid, I could go there on my own. I can remember climbing up those steps to her porch. I couldn't have been more than 2 or 2.5. I had to struggle up the steps one at a time. One guess I remember Aunt Martha so vividly was that her house was always filled with strange sounds and smells, the things that trigger our memories the most. She had terrible asthma, and she used to cough and wheeze something fierce. Sometimes she would even cry because of the pain. It hurts. And because she got so desperate for breath. I can't breathe. Something like that. She would also burn some kind of strange round substance in jar lids placed around the house. The stuff gave off an eerie smoke, and in those days before electricity came to the part of the woods, the house could get really spooky in the late afternoons. I later learned the smoke was to help her breathe. I'm going to turn this. Perfect. You don't need to look at my barbecue grill. I don't want you to fall over. Okay. Between the smoke and the coughing and wheezing, I was frightened many times, but I would never run away and leave Aunt Martha, even though I was just a toddler. I always felt like she needed me there as much as I needed her. Maybe that's the part of what made me feel special. There was fascinating and delightful sights and sounds around Aunt Martha's house, too. She had a great big spinning wheel in her living room, and I was quite taken with it. I used to stand and watch her spin yarn for hours. That wheel seemed to be as big to me then as a Ferris wheel would now. It's funny how we could remember things we knew when we were kids. Surely we're small, and that could make them seem bigger. But I think it's more than that. I think it's partly because of the wonder we experience of learning new things. I hope I never lose that wonder, and you shouldn't either. Aunt Martha was a dear, sweet soul. She would make gingerbread and hoe cakes, and she would always share them with us kids. To poor kids, those things seemed like the riches of Solomon, and we loved her for it. They tell me I used to go running up on her porch, and the first words out of my mouth would be, "Ain't you got no gingerbread?" Even if she didn't have gingerbread, there was always one special treat I could count on. Aunt Martha would sit me on her knee and ride me up and down as she would sing. Tiptoe, tiptoe, little Dolly Parton. Tiptoe, tiptoe, ain't she so fine? Tiptoe, tiptoe, little Dolly Parton. She's got a red dress just like mine. She's got a red dress just like... She's got 9. She's got a red dress just like mine. I don't know if it was in that voice, but that's what we're going to go with. I can remember being amazed that Aunt Martha knew a song that had my name in it. It never occurred to me that you could put anybody's name in a song, and after all, I was special. Why wouldn't there be a song about a special little girl? That was the first song I was ever aware of, and it was like a drug to me. I used to clap my hands and squeal, "Sing it again, Aunt Martha, sing it again!" And she usually would, unless she got to coughing and wheezing too much. It didn't bother me at all, and I didn't have a red dress, let alone 9. If Aunt Martha said it, it must be true. I'm seeing a bunch of people are joining, or a few new people. We are currently reading Dolly, My Life, and Other Unfinished Business, released in the mid-90s. Okay, where were we? When I was about 5, we moved away from Aunt Martha's place. Then the men moved the household belongings on a sled pulled behind our mule. I don't know exactly how far it was, but to a kid it seemed like a long trip. I said goodbye to Aunt Martha and toddled off behind the sled, holding on to my Aunt Tude's forefinger. Hold up. She had an aunt named Tude. Aunt Tude. I remember tripping over rocks and cow ruts and fighting my way through briars and constantly asking, "Can't we slow down?" But in the mountains there is a certain pace that survival sets for you, and it can't be changed for one dreamy little kid being dragged unknowingly through a threshold of life. Life at this new house, new to us at least, didn't seem that different to me, but the difference was a great one for my daddy. For the first time, he wasn't a sharecropper. As I recall, he bought this place for $5,000. He was determined to build a better life for us all, and that's what we should all be doing. The place has always been known in my family as Over and Holler. It was overgrown. The fences were all down. The roof leaked. Making something out of this was going to be more work than sharecropping ever was. But Daddy did it. David and Denver weren't really big enough to help very much, and it seemed as though uncles and the like were pretty scarce during working hours. Daddy worked long, hard hours, but the old place finally began to shape up. One of our favorite family stories tells about a preacher who stopped by one day while Daddy was hard at work. This particular preacher was never much of a help to anybody and seemed to show up only when we was out of beating the bushes for money. Oh no, when he was out beating the bushes for money. I think that's panhandling for money. Well, this snooty Parson in his starched collar stopped by the fence while my daddy was sweating and groaning, trying to get a stump out of the ground, and he said, "Hello, lady. This is a right place, a right nice place you and the Lord have here." Daddy wiped the sweat from his brow with the back of his sleeve and said, "Yeah? Well, you should have seen the some bitch when the Lord had it by himself." I have often joked that we had 2 rooms and a path running water, if you were willing to run to get it. I can remember being excited when we would move into a new house because there would be newspaper on the walls. Poor folks would use newspapers like wallpaper. They helped to seal the cracks and make the house warmer in the winter, but to us kids, they were something to read and new pictures to look at. We would go all over the new house reading an episode of Dick Tracy or Blondie, cartoons for all those people who don't understand what I just said. Sometimes you'd have to climb way up into a corner or stand on your head to read something that had been pasted on upside down. Some things got overlapped, so I can remember having to peel part of the paper off the wall to see how Snuffy Smith turned out. I don't know who Snuffy Smith is. It must have been a cartoon character back then too. But I do remember Dick Tracy and Blondie. Coffee break. If there's one positive thing about being poor, it's that it makes a person more creative. None of us kids ever had store-bought toys to play with when we were growing up. When I tell kids that now, they always say, "What did you play with?" I usually tell them, I haven't figured out my Dolly voice, so I'm not going to read her voice in a voice yet. Maybe by the next chapter we will. I usually tell them, I played with Denver and David and Bobby and Stella and Cassie. How can a Nintendo compare to that? I don't know when we found the time, but Daddy would sometimes make us little toys out of wood. He was a real good whittler. And he would make us little cars out of rubber bands and old thread spools. You'd wind them up and off they'd go across the dirt yard. I can still hear the sound of our old spool cars would make, clattering across the boards on the front porch. Mama made us things too. Once she made me a doll out of a corn cob. I think we did that too, actually, in elementary school when I lived in Colorado. She made it a little dress out of corn shucks and used corn silk for her hair. Daddy got the poker hot. Now, the poker is what they use in the fireplace. Keep your minds right. It's Sunday. Daddy got the poker hot in the fire and used the tip of it to burn 2 black eyes into the corn cobs. I thought she was beautiful. And I named her Tiny Tasseltop. The first song I ever wrote was a little... Tiny Tasseltop, that's funny. The first song I ever wrote about was about that little corncob doll. Little tiny Tasseltop, I love you an awful lot. Corn silk hair and big brown eyes. How you make me smile. Little tiny Tasseltop, you're the only friend I've got. Hope you'll never go away. I want you to stay. Well, what did you expect for a little kid? Again, this is Dolly Parton when she was a child poor. What did we expect of a little kid? We kids were forced to be creative. I was anyway, and I guess I did a fair share of forcing the others to go along. But we all had a good time. There is a plant that grows in the hills that we called poke salad. Sallett. Again, I don't know. I'm just reading the book. Poke salad. I believe it's actually poke salad. But we neither knew nor cared about that. Oh, Bryce is from the South. Maybe he could translate that word. What's this word? Poke?
Poke salad? I don't know. Poke salad?
He's
Poke
from the
salad?
South, and he doesn't even know.
I declare I don't know what that means at all. I brought you a smoothie, darling.
You sound like our friend Pam. Hi, Pam, if you're watching. The green leaves of the plant are actually edible. It's cooked like any other greens, but nobody ever gets hungry enough to make a meal of it except poor white. Oh, sorry, I was paused for reconnecting. I hope you're all back. Okay. Naturally, I'm familiar with the taste. Dolly's familiar because she said only poor white trash grew up eating it. The most fun for us kids were the pokeberries that grew on the stems of the plant. They're dark purple, and when you mash them, the juice is like a dye. We used to paint our skin with pokeberries so that it looked like we were wearing bracelets or wristwatches. Sometimes we would paint what we call Jesus sandals. It's fitting because this is Sunday when we're reading. Not trying to be disrespectful. Onto our feet. We would dress up in gunny sacks for robes and carry tobacco stalks as our walking sticks and go gallivanting all over the countryside pretending we were the disciples or at least some kind of biblical types. If you don't know what disciples are, biblical types, that's for you to go find out. It's in the Bible. I'm not reading that one. We felt real holy, but somehow our kinship with Jesus was lost on Mama when we came home with those awful purple stains all over us. Another thing we loved to do was to catch June bugs and tie them to a string. I'm sure it was more fun for us than the poor weighted down June bugs. But, turning the page, we had a ball flying, what we called our electric kites. Electric kites. You try to get a real good fat June bug with a good lot of lifting power. Sometimes you could just fantasize about him being able to lift you right off the ground to where you could soar up among the clouds and look down at the trees and the fields. That kind of blissful thought would sometimes come to a sudden halt when your June bug would sacrifice his leg in the name of freedom and buzz off across the pasture. That's intense. In the blink of an eye, you could go from being a kind of daring Smoky Mountain astronaut to being just a kid with a bug leg hanging from a piece of thread. I'd like to take the opportunity to public thank all of those five-legged June bugs for those dreams. Fleeting though they may have been. I was always fascinated by things that flew, especially hummingbirds and butterflies. Maybe it was because I envied the freedom they had. To me, a hummingbird seemed to have the power to buzz right out of the holler, right across Locust Ridge and out into the real world. I bet he could be in New York City by afternoon if he wanted to. It was easier for me to imagine a hummingbird doing that than it was to imagine New York City. I had no concept of how far it was or what it was like. I only knew that it was somewhere else, and that meant more to explore, more to learn, more to build dreams around. And that sounded good to me. I suppose that's why I used to try to follow them. Again, more followers. We are today reading Dolly, My Life and Other Unfinished Business by Dolly Parton herself. Okay, right back at it. A hummingbird is a hard act to follow. Darting this way and that without an instant notice, sometimes even flying backward. That coupled with the fact that when you're looking up to trying to keep your eye on a darting bird, you're bound to occasionally run into a tree or the side of a house or a brother or a sister or something that gets in the way of such a dizzy attempt of adventure. God, that sounds fun. Hi, Bryce. One day, I got to follow a butterfly. This wig's hair is getting in my nose. Oh, God. I don't know if I can grow my hair out like this. One day I got to follow a butterfly. I guess it was a monarch with beautiful iridescent orange wings and velvety coal black tipped wings. I would get as close as I could to it and hold my hand up to where I could feel the breeze. Ooh, the breeze from its wings. But I was careful not to touch it. I knew that holding it would make the color come off of its wings like powder on my hands, and that if I did, the butterfly wouldn't be able to fly anymore. I used to imagine it was some kind of magic powder. Hi from Kauai. Sorry, someone just said hi from LA. But that would mean hurting an awful lot of butterflies, and I wanted them to fly. I just have to watch them fly with him in spirit. He and my spirit must have flown a long way from home without... Hi from Utah. Oh, it's Chelsea. Chelsea. Is Casey watching too? He and my spirit must have flown a long way from home without really paying attention because I got lost. That was okay at first. I thought if I kept walking sort of in a big circle, I would eventually find something I recognized. That was actually fun, seeing places I had never been. I would find a patch of dandelions on one hill, on another a devil's snuff box, as we called them. Those were little mounds that grew low to the ground. I believe they related to mushrooms. In the summer, they get dried out, so that the outsides look like a piece of brown paper, and the inside is filled with powder that puffs out like a dragon's breath when you stomp it, or puffs out when you do something else in today's times. To somebody who has never stomped a devil's snuff box, that might seem like vandalism. Anybody who has seen one, especially as a kid, knows they just have to be stomped. Now that I've learned more about it, I know that the snuff is actually spores that help make more devil's snuff boxes on other hills for other kids to stomp. But at the time, I just knew they needed stomping. If you accept that a kid is just another one of God's creatures, like a fox or a blue jay, and I don't see how you could do otherwise, you have to believe that it is part of a divine plan for the snuff boxes to be made the way they are and for kids to stomp them, just like the bees pollinating the flowers. I'm sorry, but this next paragraph, she talks a lot about snuff boxes. We'll make it through. It's almost over. It's almost over. If God is going to depend on a kid to spread snuff boxes, see snuff boxes. He would have naturally make the stomping both fun and guilt-free. And that is just what it was. So I would stomp one and squeal with delight at the brown puff, and then see another one through the smoke and take off to my God-given duty on the next hill. Of course, I didn't realize I was doing the Lord's work, but I took to it with such zeal you would have thought I did. My work took me even farther from home. Remember, millions of paragraphs before, when we were talking about snuff boxes, she was following some butterflies and got lost. When it began to get dark, I was scared. When I couldn't see any sign of light or hear anything other than the wind and the whirlpools, or whippoorwills. I was petrified. I called as loud as I could, but there was no one to hear me. The trees were only silhouettes now, and the bushes, which my butterfly and I had swooped through so happily earlier, now began to look like hunched-over hairy things, lying in wait for me in the night. The snuff boxes I had stomped, there they are again, those goddamn snuff boxes, I had stomped so gleefully became shadowy, unknown things I wouldn't dare step on or even get near. I stepped in a small clearing. Actually, I stopped in a small clearing, as far as I could get from unfriendly bushes, and I thought for a minute or two. After some consideration, I came up with a plan. I cried. It didn't really help anything, but I figured if my poor bush-riddled body was going to be found in the morning, I was going to let it be in a pool of my own tears. That definitely sounds like something Dolly would do. Finally, when all seemed lost, I sniffed back a tear just in time to hear a familiar sound, one of my mind associated with a friend. It was not a human friend, but I was in no position to be choosy. It was the sound of the bell worn by our milk cow, Bessie. At the moment, its clanking sounded to me like angels banging on some kind of heavenly cymbal. If you listen carefully, the wind is moving our wind chime, and it probably sounded like that. Okay, so I ran toward the sound. Again, Dolly. We were reading about Dolly Parton, so she ran toward the sound and got to where I could see Bessie's hulking figure coming up the hill. I waited for her to come by, but she was in no mood to wait for me. She knew there was a bucket of feed waiting for her at the house, and she was a cow on a mission. I knew that attached to her bucket of feed would be my mama, so following Bessie became my mission. Bessie was not aware of my plan, so she had no intention of slowing down to accommodate my stubby young legs. As she passed by, I reached out and grabbed the leather collar Daddy had fashioned to hold Bessie's belt and held on for dear life. Oh, this is getting good. I soon became aware of exactly how dear my life was. As I flailed like an unwanted necktie against the cow's neck, Bessie dragged me through the briars, into the rocks and stumps, and under low-hanging limbs. Those bushes that only seemed scary were now a real threat. As they slowly flayed on my skin away, I began to think how shocked Mama would be to see Bessie coming home with a kid's skeleton hanging onto her bell strap. Oh my God, where's this going? I'm on the edge of my bench. What blood I had not left on the hackberry bushes in the holler rushed to my heart as I caught the first glimpse of my kerosene lantern Mama was holding as she called, "Bessie, soot, soot." When I was finally dragged into the yard, I thought Mama would be thrilled beyond words to see my bruised and bloodied carcass. She must have been, because she didn't use any words as she administered a few extra bruises to my butt with a hickory stick. I have to admit, that switch actually felt pretty good. Switch is a type of stick that people pulled from the trees to spank their children back in the day. That was a sidebar, just in case you didn't know what that was. As soon as the licks had been dealt out, Mama held me tight as I cried. I could see tears in the corner of her eyes, too. If you had asked her why she whipped me, she would have said it was because I hadn't come when she called me. Any parent knows that what she was really saying with that switch was, "You scared me half to death. You have to feel pain now, so that you remember this in the future." At that moment, we were both just thanking God that I had a future. Some childhood pains you get over very quickly. Others you never do. I remember one day back in that holler like it was yesterday. Mama came in one morning and said, "Y'all get dressed. We're going over to Aunt Mart's house." Well, I was jumping for joy. I hadn't seen Aunt Martha in a long, long time. I couldn't wait for her to see how much I'd grown, to tell her that I had been doing and what I had been doing, and to sing some of my songs. The trip to Aunt Martha's didn't seem nearly as long as it had when we moved. Maybe it was because my legs were 3 years older. Maybe it was because my excitement carried me along. Anyway, we soon got to Aunt Martha's, and I went running up to the steps. I could bound up them 2 at a time now, and I went flying into the house with the screen door banging behind me. I noticed there were some folks I didn't know in the kitchen, but I wasn't there to meet them. "Aunt Martha," I called as I ran into the living room. Just as my foot crossed the threshold, something hit me like a shot. I don't know if I want to finish this. It sounds sad. There was a strange feeling in the house. Stopped in my tracks as I saw a coffin in the middle of the room. We probably should have skipped this part. Poor Aunt Martha. It was in the middle of the room with its lid propped open. I wish I had stopped a little sooner. From where I could see, the pale, cold corpse inside was Aunt Martha. I stood frozen. This couldn't be. She was my Aunt Martha. She was my special friend. I needed her. She needed me. Again, we're talking about Dolly. This isn't her words. She was needed. My knees finally thawed, and I turned to run. Just as I did, I was met at the door by some of the boys in the family. When the adults were looking, they acted respectful. When they had gone, they pushed me up close to the coffin. I didn't want to look, but they held my face up to the edge. They told me they had cut Aunt Martha's open and drained out all her blood and replaced it with embalming fluid and stuffed her full of cotton and alcohol. It was the most horrible description I have ever heard. Of course, that was their intention. They explained that they were going to put her in the ground and that worms would crawl in and out of her body and eye sockets. They kept on until I got sick to my stomach, but that was not the worst of it. 2 of them held my hand and made me touch the body. I was too horrified to cry as my hand felt the cold, clammy skin of the person who had been so dear to me. But I more than made up for it later. It had a spirit-shattering effect on me, and I have never quite outgrown. To this day, I will not go to funerals, and I cannot look at a dead body. What makes children do such horrible things to other children? I suppose it's mainly ignorance. All they wanted was to make me squirm and cry for the moment. I can't believe they knew what they were really doing, and how deep the emotional scar would be for me. That was my first experience with death. I got over the boys' meanness but the sense of loss I felt that day was one I am still not at peace with, and one that has revisited me at other times in my life. Back to life as usual in the holler, a form of meanness showed up in me. Some might say that meanness begats meanness, but I'm not sure that's true. I believe you could take a kid and raise him in a vacuum and never show him anything but kindness, and there is still a certain kind of devilment that is going to enter the kid's mind. Of course, that theory could never be tested because it would be unkind to raise a kid in the vacuum in the first place. That sort of inevitable meanness must have been what led me to torment the chickens that ran in our yard. The floorboards in our cabin were so far apart, a kid could feed the chickens a bits of corn or bits of bread and crackers through the cracks. And one kid did. She's probably referring to herself. That in itself should have been fun enough. But then up steps the youthful meanness that adults make tolerable by calling it mischief. I figure that if chickens could be lured into pecking up through the cracks, a little girl with quick fingers could grab them by the beaks and hold them above the ground for a few seconds, causing them to thrash about and beat their wings as if they had been beaten up by the devil himself. Hi, Sheila. This plan was successfully carried out enough times to give every chicken in the yard a sore beak and wisdom about sticking her nose into cracks. I used to tell myself somehow that it made them better prepared for the future. It is that same kind of childlike innocence that creates such an excuse for devilment that also chose to believe a chicken has much of a future in the first place. Of course, if my daddy ever caught me at it, many of the sore chicken's beaks would be avenged on my backside in a short order. For those just joining us, we are reading Chapter 1 of Dolly, My Life and Other Unfinished Business. We are almost done with Chapter 1. I don't mean, as some celebrities have to claim that I was abused, none of us kids were. We were not beaten. We got plain old Tennessee butt whippings, and in truth, we deserved them. When one of us had done something wrong, the rest would rather die than tell the guilty party. I don't know if that was out of loyalty to the brothers and sisters or some unspoken code of the mischievous that made us keep silent, knowing the same service would be afforded us when we were the one who done it. Whatever the reason, our failure to cooperate with the party of second part, the one holding the belt, usually meant we would all end up getting spanked. God, this chapter is really ending on a sad note. It's all about getting spanked as a child. Dolly Parton, woo! Give us some lighting. Whatever the reason, our failure to cooperate with the party of the second part, the one holding the belt, usually meant we would all end up getting a spank. If we had taken a minute to think about that, we would probably have figured out that the loyalty we were drawing interest on in that unspoken kid bank was not really doing us any good if it was intended to be insurance against getting our butt beaten for some future offense. This way, we were bound to get whipped not only for that future one, but for every present one as well. Still, the code was followed, and I suppose there was some kind of integrity in it, if not the clearest of logic. I would always want to be the last in line. My plan was to run around to be the first in line before Daddy got to me, but that never worked. You'd think a man with that many kids would lose count just once in his life. Being in last place and being a sensitive kid, I ended up feeling every blow to every other kid, just as if it had landed on my butt. Oh, hi there, Willow. Daddy used to spank us with a leather strap, but Mama, when she whipped us, she would send us out to pick out a switch. Oof. We would try a crude form of mountain urchin psychology by choosing a big, dangerous-looking stick that Mama wouldn't have the heart to hit us with. We'd go out to fetch a switch, but come back with a limb that would be better used as a fence post. Our psychology usually backfired. When Mama would only get madder and go out herself and pick out one of those reedy little sting-your-butt-bad switches. Okay, so that was the end of Chapter 1 of Dolly, My Life and Other Unfinished Business. We're going to leave it at that, even though it was on such a sad moment, being switched. Several of you were asking to see Willow. Here is Willow. I think she needs a diaper change.
She needs a nice diaper.
I think Bryce sent her out.
Oh, she does need a diaper change.
So with that,
Right
we thank you all for joining us today for Chapter 1 of Dolly, My Life and Other Unfinished Business, which is a new story time with Curious. So we hope you all have a wonderful Sunday. Stay tuned to our Instagram. We'll tell you when the next chapter comes in. It'll probably be in a couple days. Maybe we'll do Tuesday, same time. See ya.
See ya.
Did you get her saying see ya?